All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA, and thanks for checking out the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? And what I want to get into today is regarding teachers. And I just want to say off the bat, it's not to throw teachers under the bus and not say that I respect their jobs incredibly. I think teachers are unbelievable. I think what they go through takes a lot of patience. I think they don't get paid probably enough, obviously. I think for what they go through and what they have to endure. But I'm going to talk about what I kind of went through growing up regarding my teachers. I'm going to basically just jump right into high school. And the reason being is because I had a lot of issues in high school. One is I went to a Catholic high school, which I had a lot of problems with priests, brothers, deacons. My mother worked for the archdiocese. I'm not going to get on that pitch, what I think about them. But what I am going to get into is a lot of times I think when kids are growing up, they listen to their teachers, which I understand to a certain degree when they're teaching lessons. You have to listen to them because you're obviously in school and they're supposed to be teaching you something. But I think a lot of times people give a lot more respect to teachers giving advice, especially regarding certain subject matters, which are like life-choosing decisions. Now, if they're helping you maybe choose a college, maybe helping you with schoolwork, things in that nature, wonderful. But I'm just going to give you a heads up. I had teachers, and I was a horrible student. I'm not going to lie about that. But I was really good I was a pretty good athlete, and I had a lot of drive. The thing I wasn't interested in was school. And I don't think anybody picked up on that necessarily. They knew that I didn't necessarily like school, but I still went to school. But what started to happen with me is I realized that I really wasn't successful because I was, for one, learning about things that I wasn't interested in, right? And I think that happens to a lot of kids. I talk to my daughters about that as well. And then the other thing is I just hated the way the school system was set up. I thought it started too early in the morning. I think going to all these different classes rapidly, giving us homework, the whole structure was outdated. I still think it's outdated. I think you really need to figure out what students, what subject matters they excel in, what things they're interested in. I also think they miss a lot of things as far as teaching you things in school, as far as when you get out of school, including financing, how to buy homes, how to deal with contracts, divorces, many different things that they never even get into, which I think they should teach. Instead, they're teaching you a lot of things that I think are ridiculous. Not saying that hypothetically geometry, history, or all these things are ridiculous. I'm not saying that. There is a lot of wasted time in school. But I'm not here to talk about that, actually. What I'm here to talk about is what I went through in school. And if you listen to my podcast, I try to always be as brutally honest as possible. And I remember my teachers growing up, because when they rate you in your school system, I was always on the bottom half. But they always said, oh, Rich, you really excel in sports. You're a captain of this team or that team. And just keep with it. And I always had to keep a C average to just play sports, which is fine. But I really didn't have an interest in that. And my mother worked for the archdiocese, like I said, so I was around a lot of Catholics, a lot of religion. And then my father owned a nightclub, which I was around a lot of adults doing a lot of different things, legally and illegally. It was just the truth. So I kind of grew up very quickly. So I knew, even when I was in high school, who was full of shit and who wasn't. I understood even what a lot of the men's behavior, I'm not going to get into how they behaved, and I picked up on a lot of different things that I didn't like. But when it came to people trying to bullshit me, I could pick up on it real quick, and my mother's the king of that, and I think my dad's pretty good at it as well. But I remember my teachers having discussions with me my senior year, and I really wasn't interested in college, so they legitimately said this, a couple of them, different teachers said, your best bet is a joke, I think they'd say, is to go into the mob, because my family was involved with different things related to that, and they knew my family. Or I should basically, legitimately, they said this numerous times, many of them, go work, try to be maybe a garbage man or do something in the union, or work for the village, which I used to work for the village for the state in the summers, which I'm not dismissing that job. I think that's a very hard job. Because they really thought I was exceptionally stupid. I mean, they really thought I was dumb, I think. But they didn't realize, in my opinion, I thought they were kind of dumb, because I would look at them and say, what the fuck have you done in your life? Like, you're teaching, you're not doing. Not only that, I look at them and look at the cars they drive. I look at the way they dress. I can even tell by their teeth, just their whole lifestyle. Probably the neighborhoods I knew they lived in, they were basically broke, or they were always struggling. And I used to think to myself, if you were so intelligent, why would you put yourself in a position like that? And again, I'm not here to dig on teachers. That was just the way I felt then as a kid. And then for them to keep giving me advice on what I should do in my future really blew my mind, especially when I started to hear brothers, which are very similar to priests, they teach or whatever, telling me, about things where they in turn never had a family. They don't have any girlfriends or a wife. No kids, obviously. All these things telling me what's good or what's going to work for me in my future. It kind of blows my mind. That really doesn't make any sense to me. And if you take advice from a lot of people that haven't been through anything, I think you're a jagoff. So if you're taking advice from older people that have never lived through having a family or being married or all these different things, and they're the ones to give you advice, I really think you should step back and kind of figure yourself out there. Because usually you want to take advice, I think, from people that have lived through it. That doesn't mean that people that haven't lived through it don't have knowledge about it. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. When some people talk, they're full of shit and some aren't, right? And again, that doesn't mean if you didn't have a family or children that you can't give advice, helping others. That's ridiculous. I'm not going that far with it, but like I said, you know who's full of shit and who isn't. And I think a lot of people are full of shit. But what my problem with teachers a lot of times, and not just teachers, this could go for a lot of people out there, is they're giving people not the correct advice when it comes to that person because they're not knowledgeable enough to know that person's strengths or weaknesses. Because I promise you, you have a lot of strengths inside of you. Some of them may have not been in school. So it was hard for you to show off your talents because you're going to all these different classes, and a lot of times you may excel in certain classes and may not in others. But again, you may have had people tell you to lead you in a certain direction in your life that you went, and you're very unhappy. You really got to figure out what your strengths are. You have a ton of different gifts and strengths, and you're probably a lot more knowledgeable about a lot of different things. You just never were taught how to either pursue them or someone didn't teach you them. Which is kind of what I want to get into right now real quick is, if you took a professor hypothetically, because I go to all these schools, I travel all over the country and I buy all these universities and I see all these professors and all this, and they're brilliant in their own right. But, if you look at a professor, they found what they're really good at, obviously teaching at a university. I don't care if it's Princeton, Harvard, or if it's just a local college. That's their strengths. But if I picked him up and threw him into an environment that he didn't know anything about, right? If education, everybody gives a lot of people a lot of credit for being very educated, which I understand. But I think people that, like, say, for instance, construction workers, people that work for the city, architecture, doctor, there's a lot of different things where they're beyond kind of other things, if that kind of makes sense. Even if I look at a fireman and a policeman, and I know a lot of times when you want to throw a policeman under the bus, I can't imagine dealing with negativity constantly, and every time I got a call it was bad news. That takes a lot of balls, man. And a lot of people don't get credit. And again, you may not know a lot of what you how do I say it? You were put in a situation where you didn't know a lot about that situation. That doesn't mean you don't know a lot. You do know a lot. And back to the professor, if I took that professor and picked him up and threw him into a police an environment where detectives or police and all them, let's see how he would prosper. He'd be out of his element because he's used to probably just teaching students what to do, or he's learned what he's learned, and that's basically what he knows, right? And my point being is we all have strengths and weaknesses no matter what position you kind of end up in your life. But don't let anybody make you feel dumb or stupid. And I remember after I graduated high school, I was actually so aggravated for some reason at my high school and at my teachers and at the environment. I almost went out on a vengeance to show them that I can be so much more than they thought I was. Now, that was just something inside of me. And I ended up at about 4 or 5 years, and I don't say this to be egotistical, but in about 4.5, 5 years, I ended up buying a house in a gated community in Florida. I brought a new Lincoln. I had a new Caddy. I had a convertible Mercedes. I had a Rolex. I was traveling all over the United States, going to Vegas. I was going to the Bahamas. I was doing all these things. And again, I'm not saying that. But I remember going back to a high school basketball game and looking at them. And back then I was so in my head, look at these fucking idiots. What have they ever done in their life? Which is a horrible way to think then. And I don't want people to think that I think that way now. But that drove me in my mind to say they never knew my potential. But it wasn't up to them. either to prove it to me or tell me what to do in my life. So if you flip it around, you've got to figure that around. You got to figure that out. It's not anybody else. It's not on anybody else. I'm sorry. But if you do have things that motivate you to drive yourself to get where you want to be, that's what you're going to have to figure out what to do, or how to do it, I should say. Now, with my ego, I thought for many, many years I did make a lot of money. And then I, like a lot of people, didn't learn how to invest my money all the time properly. I spent a lot of money, and I made a lot of mistakes as well. And I had to confront myself on that because, again, maybe there were some things that teachers or things that I should have been listening to. So the other thing I want to say is a lot of times, too, people are telling you things and they may not always have the right answer, but try to give them the respect that they deserve, because sometimes even in a discussion, maybe 90% is full of shit, but there could be that small percentage in there that really can help you down the road. Because I think a lot of times something can say someone, or a lot of times someone says one thing to someone, it sets them off to go into certain directions. It could be good or bad. It can make you happy or sad. It can make you emotionally more stable or weak. All these different types of things. So you got to be very careful of, for one, if you're listening, how you let that affect you. And my way, I let a lot of things affect me negatively, right? Because if you weren't on board with me, I was almost at war with you, which was a horrible way to think. But even back then, back to my father's nightclubs and stuff, and being around a fast lifestyle, I seen a lot of people making a lot of money quickly. I seen a lot of people go under quickly. I seen a lot of different things. And me having immigrant grandparents, I kind of looked at things so differently, because their ways, which when I was younger, I kind of was like, oh my God, they're so outdated, these Italians. Like, now I love all their beliefs, and I feel more comfortable like when I go to Italy than I almost do in the United States. I've always felt like almost a foreigner in my own country, because I think when I was in it with my immigrant grandparents, aunts and uncles, some of them, even cousins that would come in, I was kind of always like, man, they're like this old country talk. This is kind of outdated. This is nonsense, some of it. And to make a long story short, now I look at it and I miss that. But when I used to look at my teachers, for instance, back to teachers, I used to say, who taught these guys? Like, they're trying to teach me something now, but who taught them, and what books did they read to get me to now? Like, I just felt like they were always outdated. And I used to look at teachers that are 30, 40, 50 years old. And I'd be like, well, when you were in high school back, this is in obviously the 80s. So I'm thinking these guys were in high school or in college in, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Who was teaching them? Guys that were born in the 1900s? I'd be like, how fucking out of it are you? Like, and I still, to a certain degree, believe that happens in our culture, that our kids are also being taught by a lot of people that are outdated. And I hate to throw certain people under the bus, but we have to acknowledge even my belief system, for instance. A lot of times when I talk to my kids, I can hear me talking. It's my father. And I'm like, wow, that was my dad's beliefs, the way he programmed me. And now I'm trying to program my children. But that really may not work that well in this day and age, because I really believe technology changed everything. And it kind of made everybody, if you were right. But if you were stupid or a bullshitter, you get exposed. And not just going through Google, I'm just saying having the answers to a lot of things or figuring things out, where before we didn't have the opportunities to learn the way we can now. I mean, literally you could go on YouTube and kind of figure out how to fix something very quickly. How would you have done that before? You'd have to go to a library and maybe find a book on it. Not only that, you'd read about it. You didn't even have videos on it for the most part. It's unbelievable what you could do and the information you can, receive now compared to then. I almost think, well, I don't even know where the future lies for teachers, again, back to them, because I think we're always going to have universities, and I think what saves a lot of universities, truthfully, is the historical type things and the sporting attached to it, and it's just being something that's monumental, and it's just amazing to go to be a part of that culture. It's more of like saying, I want to move to this city, almost like going to that university. It's living that lifestyle just as much as it is about being educated, because a lot of us, I think, especially young people, they can really educate themselves very quickly on a lot of things without having to spend a lot of money. But again, that doesn't mean that you're going to learn everything. But I do think one strength with college is, for instance, is when a lot of these guys get out of college, it's a great networking place. I went on to make a couple feature films I wrote, directed, produced a couple films and co-produced a third. I doubt my teachers would have ever expected me to do that. And I always wanted to make movies, and I always wanted to get involved with the arts. Again, we didn't have that in my school. We had nothing related to the arts. They had a film class that taught like the history of film. Nothing against the history of film. I just wasn't at that time that interested in it. I wanted to make movies, but again, they had nothing related to that because of the school I went to. And when I would talk that, they would be like, this is a college prep school. You need to go to college and you need to become an accountant if you don't be a garbage man. Or you need to go to a junior college and figure things out and this and that, which I get. But what I wanted to do, again, they didn't have any knowledge of. I was surrounded in an area that nobody else had any knowledge of. And as my Uncle Tony used to say to me, is Rich, if you want to make movies, get around people that make fucking movies. And that's absolutely true. Again, a lot of people, I think, are put in certain situations all over. I can only speak for North America, that they go to these different types of schools where they don't have certain opportunities to do things they want to do. They either don't have the budget within their school, or they just don't have the education or the people to teach it, I guess. And after that, then I went on to write a couple books as well, which if my teachers found out that I wrote a couple books, and I kind of look back at them and say, God, like, did they ever write a couple books? Did they ever write books? Again, that was just my mindset. Do they need to write books to show how knowledgeable they are about certain things? Absolutely not. What I have said when I was younger, I'm going to go on to make films, independent movies, and then write books. I probably wouldn't have said that either, because I really thought I was going to be a professional athlete, but I just couldn't get big enough or strong enough. I was always too small. And then I just basically had to I jumped into my father's business, which was first a nightclub, and then he went into the vending business. And then it took me a while to figure out, saying, hey, I don't want to do this. I need to go do what I want to do. I need to educate myself. And one thing that I would have liked to go to, which I didn't even hear about film schools till it was kind of too late in the game. I was in my early 30s. And everyone's like, they have these film schools. You can learn about film. So I either would have went to film school, or I had to invest in my own independent film. I just wanted to dive in head first, and I, went and made my own film. Did I make the right decision? I don't know. But I will say one thing is, if I would have went to the one thing, I think I may have been a little old for film school. I'm not saying you have to have a certain age to go to film school, but if you are younger and you want to get into film school, or you want to do certain things, or you just want to go to break out of the norm instead of just going to a regular type of, I guess you could say, junior college, and you like music or video game or whatever, go do that. Because, a camaraderie, and then you build up a network, and it's fun. But the one thing I will tell you is you need to put yourself in the right place at the right time regarding whatever school you go to. And especially, say, film. I tell people, if you're going to go to film school, go to LA. If you know what I mean, if you want to go to a video game type environment, well, there's Full Sail in Orlando, Florida, but you want to go where, when you're done with your job, and I talk about this all the time in my programs, is when you're done with something, you want to be able to flow, I believe, right into something. So if you do a film school, hypothetically, in Florida, right, most likely they're making more films they're making them in Georgia, but if you want to get picked up, you want to get whatever it is to really start networking, you're most likely going to have to start meeting a lot of people in LA, other producers, directors, executives. You graduate here. Now, guess what you got to do? Now you got to still move there. And guess what? You got to start networking all over again, and everybody else has their own cliques. So if you're going to do something unique like that, try to go to that area. All right, that was just something I thought I'd throw in there. But back to, and again, this wasn't a diss on teachers or anyone. Please try to figure out who you really are and what you really want, and stop listening to people that really don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Really get around people that, really believe in you and your strengths and are doing things, actually doing them. There's a difference, again, with a teacher, I believe, a lot of times, because a lot of times those don't do, they teach. Is that the saying? So if you want to teach, I'm not saying, like, a teacher can teach certain things. If you're teaching a language, I get it. If you're teaching maybe even accounting or certain things. But a lot of times, if you want to really learn certain things, not only are you going to have to learn, you're going to have to put yourself and engulf yourself into the environment where it is happening. And I mean really happening, because very similar to like that movie, I don't know if you ever saw Rodney Dangerfield's, what's called Back to School, when he's arguing with the professor. I think it's about construction maybe. And the guy's saying, well, you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And Rodney Dangerfield says, what are you talking about, dude? You know what you got to do? You got to do this, and you got to, you know what I mean, pay somebody under the table here. You got to pay this person off. You got to figure out who's got this, and the unions are this. That's the reality of life. There's a difference between sometimes learning something and living it, obviously. And I don't think a lot of people understand that difference. And they also go to certain classes or schools or whatever to learn. But then when they get into the real world, they get devoured. And I talked about this actually in a previous podcast, where you have to educate yourself, not only mentally for whatever you want to do, and you could do that through school, you also have to learn the streets. If you do not learn the streets, you are going to get devoured. You are going to be the egg. You are going to be taken advantage of. You're most likely going to lose everything. Even if you don't lose everything, you're going to constantly be struggling. You have to have kind of two mindsets, and you have to be fearless. It's hard, a lot of times too, like even if you go to certain colleges or schools and you graduate and then you're like, okay, now what? Well, now what? You better kick it in the fucking ass is what you better do. You should have been kicking it in the ass and learning the streets while you're in school. Now, learning the streets doesn't mean learning things that are illegal. But you have to understand there's a way to do things that are a lot different than the way you're being taught a lot of times in life. And people don't want to admit that. Schools don't want to admit it either. But there's a huge difference between the fairy tale of what you're being taught through a book or maybe even watching videos compared to what's going down in real life. I can assure you that. And nobody, no matter who you are, takes the same road. And that can even go if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a filmmaker. No person does the same thing to get to where they want to be. Nobody at all. Not everybody has the same amount of money. I don't even care if you're twins. You're both going to live different lives. I don't care if you're all going to have different sleeping patterns, eating patterns, different wealth or poverty. You're going to go to different schools. You're going to take different classes. You're going to meet different people. Some are lazier than others. Some are better at this and worse at that. Whatever the case may be, we all take our own path. And don't always get caught up in listening to what other teachers or other people are always preaching to say, hey, take my, like I go through that with my program. I tell people all the time, my program is just to show you what worked for me. I'm going to try and help you, but I'm not here to change you. And I'm definitely not here. If you do everything I did, I can assure you it's not going to work for you the same way it worked for me. And yours may work better or worse, but you're not me. I'm not you. Personality, all that's different. So when people, a lot of times I see them teaching programs or schooling or whatever, saying, okay, if you do this, that'll happen. If you do this, this'll happen. If you do this, that'll happen. Even back to somebody being a lawyer. If you go to certain classes, one of my entertainment lawyers teaches law. Each student, some pass, some fail. He's teaching the same thing to each one of them. Is one smarter than the other? Probably. Is one studying harder than the other? Probably. Is, one may have to work a full-time job trying to, pass the bar. He's tired. Who knows? But you need to figure out what works for you individually again. And a lot of these people, I see a lot of public speakers pitching all these type of things, especially in sales. You do this, especially like flipping houses. You do that, this works. You do that, this will work. Some of those things definitely work. I'm not going to say they don't. But you need to find your own niche and how it works, because a lot of times things don't work. Or they'll start to work out at the beginning because it's very simple at the beginning. But all of a sudden, do you think, like you're going to be able to control the market? Or do you think no one lives in your same area? Say you want to get into real estate. Your area may be different than what they're teaching about. It may be a harder place to sell, a harder place to flip, harder place to rent. Or you may be in a different place where you can't afford to do what you want to do. There's all these different things coming into play. So for people to always say, follow my program or listen to what I say, and this is most likely what's going to happen, it's probably not. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they start to listen to these people, and it doesn't work out the way they think it's going to work out. And I teach that a lot in my fitness stuff, because no matter who you are, we all have different genetics again. We all eat differently, sleep differently, work out differently. The intensity is different. For me to show you how to work out, I can't do the push-ups for you. You're going to get the results that you get depending on what you go through, right? And it's not just about coming to a gym for 2 hours. It's when you leave the gym. Are you drinking? Are you partying? Are you sleeping? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating right? All these different things. There's so much more to it. Again, I can tell you what to eat, how to sleep, all different types of things. Are you going to follow that? Even if you followed it to a T, again, you have different genetics than me. You have a different mind than me. You have a different body, obviously, than me. If we both did the exact same thing, we are still not going to get the exact same results. Physically, one may just be better than another, right? One just may be mentally stronger than another. That's not bad. But my point being is nobody is alike, all right? So I'm going to wrap it up there. I was just in the gym thinking about this in the sauna, actually, and I'm like, you know what? I got to just, spew this out very quickly. All right, if you get a chance, check out my programs, too. It's called Mastering Self-Confidence. It's the blueprint to try to help men find the woman or women of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. Again, I'm not here to tell you, or I'm not the answer to all your fucking problems, or I'm not here to say if you do these certain things, you could become a pickup artist. It's not anything about that. It's just me trying to help people that kind of fall into a rut, or people that feel lonely. That's really what it's about. I always get questioned. The other day, a guy's like, dude, I want to do your program. And then he's like, it's a pickup art, right? Me and my friend. And I says, well, you can use it for that. And I always talk about that, but it's not necessarily about that. It's about really putting yourself in the right place at the right time to meet the correct type of woman or women that I think would work for you. Not that I think, that you would think. Hopefully, it's really about putting yourself at the right place at the right time. And I believe that in all aspects of life. And I also have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube page. You may even be listening to my YouTube page. I posted on there as well, besides the podcast. And what else do I have? Twitter, LinkedIn, shit like that. So, all right. Well, take care. And I wish you nothing but the best. And if you're traveling, safe travels.